Good morning, second graders. Today is Tuesday, May 19th. Now, our matrix today tells us for reading that we are going to read the book Pheasant and Kingfisher and to pay close attention to the order of events in the story, and we'll do a sequencing activity tomorrow. So because you don't really have an assignment in your story today, because we're going to do it tomorrow, I thought today would be a great day to start doing your second grade memory book. Okay, so this is what's in your packet. We talked a little bit about it yesterday that we were going to start this week. So I'd like you to grab your memory book, and I'm going to talk to you about the first page that I would like for you to do today. So if you need to pause this video and go get your memory book, go ahead. That would be great, because we're going to talk about some things that you can write down on your page. So your sheet is going to look like this. This is the one I want you to do today. It's called In Second Grade. And there's going to be some sentence starters up here that I would like for you to fill in. Now, since we're not going to get to be together to do this, normally we do this in school and I write down a bunch of ideas on the board and then you can look at those ideas and know how to spell them. We don't get to do that this year, which I feel very sad about, but we still want to have a memory book, so we're going to do it the best we can. So instead of me writing a bunch of ideas down, you're just going to have to think it through and think carefully because you want to do a really good job on your memory book. And then ask your parent to help you spell it, or maybe an older brother or sister, okay? Because I want you to do the very best job you can do. And hopefully that this is something that you keep forever. I know with my kids, my own kids, I got their memory books out at their graduation open houses, and that was really fun for people to look through. And even if you don't have a graduation open house, it's still fun to have it as a keepsake and pull it out years later and look at all the things that were important to you as a second grader. So we're going to go through this a little bit. So it says, my teacher was, and hopefully you know how to spell Mrs. Lunning without asking your parent, but if you do need help, go ahead and ask. They know how to spell it. The next one says, the best part about my teacher was, so you can think about that and fill that in. The thing I liked best about second grade was, okay, some other answers in the past have been my friends or my teacher or learning new things or whatever it is that you liked best about second grade. One thing I didn't like was, okay, well, I have a great answer for that. One thing I didn't like was having to leave school early due to COVID-19. That made me very sad. So that might be an answer that you write on that line. My favorite subject was, so think about your subjects, math, reading, science, gym, music, art, spelling, all of those things are subjects in school, okay? I became better at. Think of something that you became better at. What did you have a harder time with at the beginning of the year that you became a lot better at? Many of you can write, I became better at reading, because you did. Many of you became better at your timed tests and your math facts. Many of you maybe became better at writing in your journal or spelling. Okay, those are examples that you can use. It was funny when. This is kind of a hard one because normally we do this all together and then other kids give ideas. So think of something that you think was funny this year. What was something that happened? Maybe with you and your friends on the playground, or maybe something in class that we laughed about, or maybe something in the hallway that was funny. Okay, think of something. Did Sir Nevlin do something funny? Or did Mr. Wolf do something funny? Any of those ideas might help you come up with something for that. And then at recess, so what did you do at recess? Did you play soccer? Did you play tag? Did you swing? Did you play on the monkey bars? What did you do? And then my favorite field trip was, okay, we only got to take 2 of them this year. We went to the Nature Center and we went to Matchbox Theater. And then part of going to Matchbox Theater was we got to go to the community center. Remember the rec center we got to go to right after it first opened? That was cool. So any of those 3 things you could put. And something I will never forget was, and something that you will never forget, what is that going to be? So go ahead and think about that. Maybe something that you will never forget was having to do distance learning during a worldwide pandemic. That's a good answer, isn't it? Because that's pretty unique to this grade, isn't it? Hopefully that doesn't happen ever again. All right, so just do this sheet today. You don't have to do any other sheets, just this sheet. And think really carefully, do a good job, write neatly. And then on Seesaw, I put an activity where it tells you to, when you're done writing it, color the 4 pictures nicely, and then go ahead and read your answers to me on Seesaw so that I can see what you put. I'm looking forward to that. All right? So that's one thing that you can do today. All right, now, to get to our story today, we are going to read this story, and it's called Pheasant and Kingfisher. And this is a story told by the Aborigines of Australia. And the Aborigines are a group of people who lived in Australia long before other groups of people came to live there. Okay? And it's a story that's been told from one generation to the next. They just pass it down and they tell it out loud. They didn't have anything written down. They would just tell it out loud. It's called an oral tradition. And the author of this book, who is Catherine Burnt, she was an anthropologist who studied different groups of people. So she actually lived in Australia for a long time. And she recorded many of their stories that they handed down from one generation to the next. And she recorded it in the local language of Gunwingu. And then she translated it into English. And this is one of those stories. So because I have a lot more to teach you and a lot more to tell you about this story before we actually start reading it, I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn the camera around and we will do more of our learning from there. Okay, so before we actually begin reading our story, I want to give you some background information, some more than I already have, because you know that we usually in reading don't just jump right in and read the story. Mrs. Lunning always gives you some information that will help you to better understand the story, to better comprehend the story, right? Because that's how well you understand what's being read. So we're going to pretend that this is my chart paper in the story spot. Since I don't have it at home, we're going to do it like this so that you can see it under the video camera. So the title of our story, like I said, was The Pheasant and the Kingfisher. And the genre of the story, and that's what type of story it is. Lots of times we have nonfiction or we have fiction. Today the genre is a myth. And a myth is a story that tells how something came to be. It often uses fantasy, such as magic, to tell the story. So when you listen to the story today, you're going to be able to tell that some parts are fantasy, and that means fantasy means parts of the story that cannot happen in real life. Okay, that's what fantasy means. And some of them are going to be real, and that's realism. And those are parts of the story that can happen in real life. So there's going to be a little bit of both, fantasy and realism. But the myth uses fantasy such as magic oftentimes to tell the story. And something else that's another thing that we use to show how something came to be is called a pourquoi. And if you want to know what that is, that's a cool word. It says, what are pourquoi tales? And it's a French. It means French for why. So pourquoi stories are the genre of tales and legends that explain why something in the natural world is the way it is. So for example, how the camel got his hump. That would be a story of how the camel got his hump. It's how something came to be. And that's this story that we're reading today, The Pheasant and the Kingfisher. It's going to be about how the pheasant and the kingfisher came to be. Okay, and we'll talk about that more as we read this story. So the setting takes place in Australia. All of you know where Australia is. It's one of the 7 continents, isn't it? Where kangaroos live. That's probably how you know it best. And some vocabulary words that we're going to go over are, what is a pheasant and a kingfisher? That's the title of our story. What are they? The pheasant is a large bird with a long tail. And the kingfisher is a bird that eats fish and insects. Okay? And if you remember, I told you that it is called, the Aborigines are the group of people that live in Australia that came before all people from other countries even came. Okay? Now Australia is made up of all groups of different people, but the Aborigines were the original group of people. Okay? And remember, it's told from the author, Catherine Berndt, who was an anthropologist. And an anthropologist is a scientist who studies groups of people to learn about their culture. And so she was in Australia to study about different people in Australia, and the Aborigines especially, to learn about their culture. Okay? And then here's just a little chart I found on realism and fantasy, because that's what we're talking about too. So realism means it can happen, it means it's real, and it has stories that are funny, fact-filled, fictional, but have elements that could happen. So even though it's fiction, it could happen. Kind of like realistic fiction. That's one of our genres too, isn't it? We've talked about that. And here's fantasy. It cannot happen. It means it's make-believe, and it has stories with animals talking or wearing clothes, magical places or things, and silly characters. You can see the cute little alien here for fantasy and the picture of the girl for realism. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow. So be listening for some things in the story today that are realistic or fantasy. Okay? All right, so here we go. We're going to read this story. And Mrs. Lenning's actually going to take the video camera out and show you that way so that we can read the whole story. Otherwise, it's too hard to put it underneath the camera. Let's look at the cover. The Pheasant and the Kingfisher. Okay, so which one do you think is which? We'll look about that in the book. And then let's look at the back, the blurb on the back. For generations, the Aboriginal people have told a tale of two men who came from the far northwest. One was Book, the pheasant, and the other was Barid, the kingfisher. Their story has been recorded by anthropologist Catherine Berndt and beautifully illustrated by Aboriginal artist Aaron Raymond Meeks. They have preserved this small part of the vast, rich culture of the Aboriginal people to share with you and other readers the world over. So the person who drew the pictures is actually an Aboriginist, and that is going to make the pictures really cool. Okay, so you'll have to notice the pictures too. So I'm going to pull out the camera and start reading. So here we go. There's a picture of the illustrator. Okay. Long, long ago, two men came from far in the northwest, from the other side of Bathurst and Melville Islands. One was called Book, the pheasant. The other was Barid, the kingfisher. Okay, and if you look at the illustrations, they look silly, huh? Okay, so here's a part character and here's a character. This one's going to be the pheasant, and this is going to be the kingfisher. Or maybe it's the other way around. We'll have to see. You got to keep reading. Both of them carried fire sticks, and as they came along, they set fire to the dry grass. Each night they made camp, and each morning they started off again. They walked on, with their palm leaf baskets of fresh water to drink when the country was dry. It was a long way to travel, but at last they came to the place where they wanted, where bamboo spears grew beside the stream. Okay, now, in the vocabulary words that we learned about, it says that the pheasant is a large bird with a long tail. Okay, so we can't tell which is which yet because they don't have tails yet, do they? So we can't tell for sure. They heard the bamboo stems whistling together, and the mosquitoes were thick down by the water, so they camped a little way off on higher ground. They stayed there a long time. One day they would go hunting and bring back plenty of food, and the next day they would just stay in their camp. Often they would sing and dance together, and they were busy cutting bamboo spears with sharp points and carving spears with strong wooden blades. Now, something else that you're going to do tomorrow for your assignment is you are going to put the story in order. So you're going to have some sentences, and you're going to have to put those in the correct sequence. So also be paying attention to the order of the story as well. You're so smart. We're going to do two things at once tomorrow. At last, they had a visitor, a man called Najalambao. I left a lot of men back that way, he told them. They are coming to kill you. This place belongs to them, and you should have asked them first before you cut all those bamboos. What are you going to do? They talked together for a while, and the two men gave him food and meat before he went home. There's Najalumbo. Then Book and Barid began to get ready. They were both clever men and had plenty of power, and they knew just what to do. Book painted himself all over with dark red clay and a little bit of white. Barid painted himself yellow. They made their spears straight and sharp, and then sat there waiting. Okay, so Book painted himself red. So I'm going to guess that's the pheasant, and that's the kingfisher. Kind of looks orange, not yellow, doesn't it? We'll see if we're right. Soon as they watched, they saw a crowd of armed men coming up to them. They stood up and began to throw their spears, but spears were flying all over the camp. There were so many men all throwing spears that Book and Barid couldn't dodge them. They grew weak and short of breath. Let's get away now, they said to each other. It was time for them to use their power. Feathers were starting to come out all over their bodies, and their arms were turning into wings. Do you see some fantasy coming into the story now? Book put bamboo spears in his spear thrower at his back, and they grew into a wide fan-shaped tail. Barid made his tail from a burning fire stick. Their enemies were trying hard to spear them, but now it was too late. The two men flew away from them, high into the sky. They did not talk like men anymore. Book was a pheasant now. Barid, his friend was a kingfisher. Were we right? Okay, Book put bamboo spears and his spear thrower at his back that grew into a fan-shaped tail, and Barid made his from a burning fire stick. Hey, we were right. So the one with the longer beak is Barid, and the shorter beak is Book the pheasant. So this is the kingfisher, and this is the pheasant. As they flew, their enemies on the ground below them turned into stone. You can see them there today. But the two men turned into birds, and they still fly about, calling out their own names. Book, and Barid. And that is the story of how pheasants and kingfishers came to be. And then this is a page about the author. There's a picture of her right there. She's an anthropologist, and she's collecting stories from the Aborigine people there in Australia. Okay? Cool, huh? So the story used fantasy and realism to tell how something came to be, the pheasant and the kingfisher. So I hope you liked that story. I'm going to stick the camera back underneath here, and we'll get going on math. So while I do that, I'm just going to tell you that, remember, there's no assignment today for your book. We're going to do that tomorrow, okay? And you're going to put some sentences into the correct order. So tomorrow you might have to rewatch the video from today just to make sure that you are correct, okay? All right. So for math today, our matrix says, check my progress. So hopefully you grabbed your math packet. If you need to do that, pause the video and go get it with a pencil. And you are going to do both sides of your check my progress page. So I'll kind of go over it quickly, and then you are going to finish it. Okay, so here's your vocabulary check. You have minute, analog clock, hour, digital clock, and half hour. So you need to complete each sentence with one of those vocabulary words. So number 1, 60 minutes is 1 blank. 30 minutes is 1 blank. 60 seconds is 1 blank. Number 4, a blank uses only numbers to show time. And number 5, and blank has an hour hand and a minute hand to show time. Hopefully those are pretty easy for you. At the bottom, you need to tell what time is shown on the clock and write that. So that's easy. Okay. And then on the back, you have to draw the hands on each clock and then write the time. Remember, when you draw hands on the clock, your minute hand has to touch the number and your hour hand is shorter. Okay. And if it's like something 30, 2:30, or 1:30, remember that hour hand has to be in the middle of the 2 hours. Okay. So go ahead and write that and then tell what time it is on the digital clock. And then number 12 and 13, write the time. And that means 1/2 what? Okay. And the brain builders. Kevin has 3 classes in a row. The first 2 classes are each 2 hours long. His third class is 1.5 hours long. Kevin's first class is at 7 o'clock. When will Kevin's last class end? So if I were you, I would maybe draw a picture like we did on our problem solving unit or lesson. So the first 2 classes are 2 hours. His third class is 1.5 hours. Okay, if his first class is at 7, okay, maybe you can put 7 o'clock right here and put first class and then second class and then third class. All right, and kind of count up. First 2 classes are 2 hours long. So what's 2 hours past 7? Okay. And then his last class is right here. I didn't put that one. We need the last one. So this is 2 hours after, 2 hours after, and then 1.5 hours after that. So what time would that be? Draw that out. And number 15, the class bell rings every 30 minutes. The first one rings at 8:30. What time will the fourth bell ring? Okay, so this time your pattern is every 30 minutes. Okay, so do it like we did up here. The first one is 8:30. Okay, and then what time will the fourth bell ring? So this is the first one, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. If you go every 1/2 hour, what time will the fourth bell ring? Go ahead and color that in. All right. Good luck with your math. Remember to do your memory book page today. I hope you do a great job and keep it nice and safe because we're going to keep working in that memory book. You don't have another reading assignment for your pheasant and kingfisher book until tomorrow, and then you just have to do your math page today, the front and the back. All right? Have a wonderful day, second grade, and I will be back with you again tomorrow. Bye.